The first time I caught him, it was just past midnight. My motion sensor light flicked on, and I looked out the window to see a figure crouched by the side of my house. For a moment, I thought it was a prowler, until the light revealed the sharp gray HOA polo and that smug little smirk. It was Derek, the HOA security officer. Only there was nothing official about him. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't even licensed security. He was just the kind of power-drunk neighbor who liked to pretend the HOA gave him authority. What was he doing there, plugging his Tesla into my solar grid? I watched from the shadows as he traced the cord like a thief, stealing energy right out of my outdoor panel. My panels were military grade, installed back when I decided my family would never be at the mercy of rolling blackouts or HOA power games. I built this place like a fortress, silent and self-reliant. And now, here was Derek, siphoning off my work like it was his right. The first time, I let it go. I wanted to see how far he'd take it, but it didn't stop. Night after night, he came back, plugging in without permission. Sometimes he even had the gall to nod at my cameras, like he knew I wouldn't do anything. That's the problem with people like Derek. They mistake restraint for weakness. The HOA had been circling my family for months. First it was unauthorized modifications because my solar setup wasn't bought through their preferred vendors. Then came the fines for exterior non-compliance, as if harnessing the sun was some kind of crime. My wife told me to stay calm. My daughter said the neighbors whispered about us. I didn't care. What mattered was protecting them and making sure no one thought we were easy targets. But Derek had pushed too far. This wasn't just harassment. It was theft. And worse, it was arrogance, the kind that begged for a lesson. That night, as I stood in the dark watching his Tesla leech off my power, I made a decision. If he wanted juice from my system, I'd give him exactly what he asked for, but on my terms. I started preparing the adjustments. Nothing illegal, nothing that could be traced. Just a small tweak in the voltage regulator, enough to teach a very expensive lesson. The next night, I saw the same beam of headlights roll to a stop outside my house. The engine cut. A door opened. Footsteps crunched over gravel. He was back. And this time, I was ready. Derek didn't even bother being quiet this time. He strolled into my side yard like he owned the place. Tesla cable slung over his shoulder, humming some off-key tune. My cameras caught everything. Every arrogant step, every casual glance toward my house. He thought I was asleep. He thought I wouldn't dare. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the entire day fine-tuning the regulator on my solar system. I didn't rig anything unsafe, but I did set it to deliver a surge the moment someone bypassed the security panel. My setup could handle it. His precious Tesla, not so much. The cable clicked into place, and I watched the blue charging light flicker on the side of his car. For a moment, it looked routine. Then, with a sharp snap, the system spat back. Sparks jumped from the port, and the light turned red. Derek cursed loud enough for the whole cul-de-sac to hear. He yanked the plug, shaking his hand, glaring up at my windows like he knew I was watching. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my door. HOA letterhead, Derek's sloppy handwriting. It read, "Unauthorized tampering with community power infrastructure. Fine, $1,000. Pay within 7 days." I almost laughed. Community power infrastructure? He was stealing my energy, and now he wanted me to pay. Word spread fast in the neighborhood. Some of the quieter folks crossed the street when they saw me, whispering. A few supportive neighbors, like Mr. Hahn from 3 houses down, gave me a nod and muttered, "They're out of line." But most, they were too afraid. The HOA had a grip on them, and Derek was their enforcer. That afternoon, as I checked the perimeter cameras, I noticed something worse. 2 men in matching windbreakers, clipboards in hand, were snooping around my property. They weren't electricians. They weren't inspectors from the city. These were HOA contractors, pretending to have authority. They scribbled notes, took pictures, and ignored my warning signs. I stepped outside. "Can I help you?" I asked flatly. One of them flashed a badge-shaped keychain, cheap plastic glinting in the sun. "HOA compliance inspection, sir," I smiled coldly. "Then you'd better have a real warrant, because the next picture you take will be evidence for trespassing." They hesitated, muttered something about reporting to Derek, and left. But the message was clear. Derek wasn't going to stop. He was escalating. And I knew where this was headed. That night, around 2 a.m., my cameras lit up again. Not just Derek this time, 3 figures, all in black, one carrying bolt cutters. They weren't just stealing power anymore, they were coming in. The bolt cutters snapped like gunfire in the night. I was already awake, watching from my upstairs window, heart steady, mind cold. 3 men moved through my yard, shadows under the security floodlights. Derek led them, jaw set, eyes darting toward my cameras. Behind him, 2 bigger men, rent-a-thugs he'd probably scraped up from a local bar, dragged tools and bags. They thought they were invisible. They thought I was defenseless. They were wrong. I slipped downstairs without turning on a single light. My wife stirred in bed, whispering, "Gee, is it them?" I pressed a finger to my lips. My daughter's door was shut tight. I wasn't about to let fear reach her room. From the hallway closet, I retrieved the reinforced flashlight I'd used overseas. More than bright enough to blind, heavy enough to break bone if I had to. Alongside it, my phone was cued to call the county sheriff. No HOA badge in the world carried weight against real law enforcement. Through the back door glass, I saw Derek wave his arm. "Cut it, quick," he hissed. The 2 thugs started working on the lock to my solar grid panel. Sparks hissed as they jammed tools where they didn't belong. That panel wasn't just hardware, it was security, power, independence. They weren't just stealing volts, they were trying to break me. My finger hovered over the dial button for the sheriff, but I didn't press it, not yet. I wanted them caught in the act. I wanted them with their hands full of evidence when the real badges arrived. The sound of metal tearing filled the night. One of the thugs grunted, "Got it." The panel door swung open, and the wiring lay exposed. They didn't notice the small, blinking red light above it, my tamper alarm. Inside my pocket, my phone buzzed. Silent notification, system breach, yard panel. The message went straight to my private security server, time-stamped and logged. Proof. Derek crouched, plugging his car into my line like a thief fumbling at a safe. "Hurry," he barked, "before he wakes up." I stepped onto the porch, flashlight raised. The beam hit them like a blade. "Too late," I said. My voice was calm, level, but it carried weight. They froze. One thug shielded his eyes, the other cursed. Derek squinted, rage flickering across his face. "You don't know who you're messing with," he snapped. I tightened my grip on the flashlight. "Neither do you." And then the tamper alarm screamed to life, a shrill siren that ripped through the night. The alarm howled through the cul-de-sac, slicing through the night like a war siren. Curtains snapped open in neighboring houses, silhouettes pressing against windows. Derek's 2 hired muscle panicked first, looking around like cornered rats. But Derek? He puffed up his chest, sneering, as if the noise was beneath him. "You're done," he shouted over the siren. "This whole street belongs to the HOA. You'll pay, one way or another." I walked down the steps slowly, flashlight beam steady on his face. My training drilled into me. Never rush, never lose composure. Control isn't taken in a fight. It's shown before the first strike. "Step away from my property," I commanded, voice sharp enough to cut steel. One thug muttered, "This ain't worth it," and started to backpedal. Derek grabbed his arm. "Stay put," he barked. "He's bluffing." Bluffing, he had no idea. I angled the flashlight, blinding Derek just as I barked again. "Hands where I can see them." The thugs hesitated, trembling under the white-hot glare. One dropped the bolt cutters with a clang that echoed down the street. That sound brought the neighbors out further. Doors cracked open. Someone whispered, "Is that Derek?" Another murmured, "What's going on?" The neighborhood was watching, and that was my advantage. "You're impersonating authority, trespassing, and tampering with private energy equipment," I said, each charge rolling out like a hammer blow. "Keep it up, and you'll be facing prison time. Step back. Now." Derek laughed, but it was hollow. Sweat ran down his temple. "You think anyone's going to believe you? I am the HOA." They thought they could break me. I lowered the flashlight just enough for him to see the red recording light on my chest cam. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. The thugs froze when they realized everything was documented. Faces, actions, words. One bolted into the dark, leaving Derek sputtering. The other dropped his tools and raised his hands high. Derek lunged forward, rage overtaking reason, shoving a hand toward the panel. Big mistake. I pivoted, flashlight cracking against his wrist with a solid thud. He yelped, stumbling back, clutching his arm. The neighbors gasped. His power trip shattered right there in the middle of the street. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the alarm. Derek turned, eyes wide, as the reality settled on him. He wasn't in control anymore. This was over. The HOA sirens still shrieked when the first cruiser rolled into the cul-de-sac, blue and red lights washing over every front yard. Neighbors spilled onto porches, whispering, phones raised, some recording the spectacle. Derek stood frozen by my solar grid, clutching his wrist, face pale under the flashing lights. 2 deputies stepped out, hands resting on their belts. The taller one's voice carried authority. "What's going on here?" I didn't move from my porch. I just pointed. Caught them trespassing, cutting locks, and stealing power from my system. Everything's on camera, including his threats. The deputy's eyes shifted to Derek. He stammered, This is HOA business. We have jurisdiction over..." The shorter deputy barked a laugh. "Jurisdiction? Sir, you're on private property, impersonating authority, and tampering with electrical infrastructure. That's felony territory." I handed over the footage from my chest cam, time-stamped and clean. One deputy reviewed the recording, nodding grimly. Textbook evidence. The thugs didn't even try to fight it. One already had his hands up. The other had vanished into the dark, but the deputies would track him down soon enough. Derek, though, still clung to his arrogance. "You don't understand. Without me, this neighborhood falls apart. I am the law here, the deputies." He snapped cuffs onto his wrists, shutting him up with the cold bite of steel. "No, sir. You're under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, impersonating an officer, and attempted theft of utilities." The neighbors gasped, some covering their mouths in disbelief. For the first time in months, I saw hope instead of fear in their eyes. Mr. Hahn stepped closer, muttering, "About time someone stood up to them." Others nodded. Whispers spread. The HOA's finished. Derek was shoved into the back of the cruiser, still sputtering, still claiming he'd get out of this. But no one believed him anymore, not with the proof in my hands, not with the law finally cutting through the HOA's false power. Over the next few weeks, everything unraveled for them. Derek's arrest exposed a trail of corruption, fake fines, unauthorized fees, even skimming money from community accounts. By the time investigators finished, the HOA board dissolved under criminal charges. Their so-called authority vanished overnight. And us? My family could finally breathe. No more notices on the door, no more trespassers in the yard. Just peace, the kind of peace you fight for and hold on to with everything you've got. Months later, the HOA sign at the neighborhood entrance was torn down. In its place, nothing but open sky and quiet streets. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I sat on my porch with my wife and daughter. The panels hummed softly, feeding power into our home, untouched and ours alone. And for the first time in a long time, the only sound left was silence, the kind of silence you earn after a battle won,